Planning for the future.
Planning for the future. But as customary, we always want to give an update.
Let's see if this is gonna work. It's already trying to disconnect. Side of the mountains from us here in Oregon, forecast all the way up to 115 next week. So we've been hanging out in the 90s, upper 90s. Definitely warm. The critters aren't real happy, but everybody's kind of hanging in there. We're forecasted for currently, I think, like 101, 102, something like that for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, somewhere in there. So definitely warm. In fact, I'm working on a video right now that hopefully we'll have out Friday, talking about what you can be doing for specifically rabbits. And then I might work on something for just animals in general because it's pretty hot. It's pretty miserable. Luckily, we've got a lot of good breeze going. Hasn't had a still day yet, which is good and bad. We had lightning last night.
Mm-hmm.
Several of those kicked off fires throughout the county. For the folks that have been asking us about the fire that's over towards Bonanza, I got a whole bunch of messages from folks. It's like 20 miles from us, and they're doing pretty well at containment now, aren't they?
Yeah, they said overnight that even though they had breezes or wind to deal with, they didn't lose any of the containment. So it's pretty much contained. I think they're just letting it burn itself out, which unfortunately means that it's just going to keep going. It's going to scorch the earth a little bit, but it will eventually burn itself out. And it's, I don't know, somewhere in the 1,300 to 1,400 range for acreage.
Yeah.
And then I saw they lost 22 structures already.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see that. A lady I know got evacuated, but her house was okay. She got to go home yesterday or today, and everything was okay. But down the street from her, she could actually see some of the scorched areas. So, and then and one popped up in Chiloquin the other day. It was like 30 acres. They got that one out. That was a house fire that spread, but they were getting that out. So, yeah, other than really hot, really dry, we're not doing, I mean, we're doing the usual, trying to keep up with farm chores and keep everybody comfortable kind of thing, but nothing out of the ordinary. Been working on the garden a whole lot. I'm sure everybody by now knows we were sick for the last half of May and the first week of June. So I'm super behind on the garden, but I have gotten some of it in. Decided not to plant the dome greenhouses this year. It is just too dang hot. I don't think I can keep enough airflow in them. So we're just going to kind of set them aside and not do anything with them till fall. I'll plant my fall veggies in there again. But mostly we're just focusing on the main garden. The things that are planted out there are doing pretty well. I've had some, one particular variety of cabbage that just has pretty much given up the ghost. It's decided it just doesn't really want to deal with the hot temperatures. Some of the other ones that I've got out there are doing fine. We put shade cloth over the cattle panel greenhouse. I've got tomatoes in there, and they're way not happy. So I put some shade cloth over the center of it. They are now doing much better. And because it's so dry, and because I'm not overhead watering this year, I'm actually watering every bed, so the garden is taking a little bit more time than normal. I think it's a testament to how dry it is. The number of toads and frogs that have moved in and are actually digging holes and hanging out in the cool garden beds. I unearthed this guy that, no kidding, was like 5 inches long. I saw a big roughed up spot in the garden, and I assumed the cats had gotten into it and kind of took a shovel poking around there because you don't want to deal with an unpleasant cat surprise. And it jumped out, and I looked at it, and I was like, oh my god, that's like the biggest toad I've ever seen. So yeah, that's kind of the big stuff. I am still kind of breeding rabbits. I'm doing it since I've got stackers. The pregnant does all go to the bottom stack, and we keep the barns at 80, 85, even in the hottest. I mean, we'll see what it does if it goes under 100 or over 100, but the misters and the fans seem to do okay. So we're gonna continue trying to breed for a little bit. I'm just gonna watch it. If by the time these does start kindling, if it's just looking too dang hot, and it might, we'll probably give up for the rest of the summer. Just too warm, too warm. I did talk to the rancher last week that's got his cows out. Usually we don't see the range cows until gosh, traditionally late July, early August. And this year they've been here since Memorial Weekend, which kind of sucks. But the creek is drying up. So he's telling me absolutely make sure you get your hay by September because hay prices are going up, at least for where we're going to get, third, fourth cuttings of alfalfa and even third cuttings of grass and things like that. So I know the members probably saw it. We had a bit of a casualty on Friday.
Yeah.
Somebody trespassed again. We had a trespasser go down into one of our hip camp sites. We didn't see them come in, so we didn't know. But our camper was gone, had come back, and some of his stuff was on the ground. And somebody had ran over and killed our brand new fire pit. And it's bad. I mean, they full on ran up and over it. There's no saving it. So, kind of a bummer deal. We bought ours last year for $100. Just picked up another one, and they're 150. I don't think anyone's probably surprised by that if you've looked at lumber prices.
Yeah. Happy with power, I guess. We don't have to run the generator at night anymore to limp the batteries along. I don't have to check them every couple of days and make sure they're not going to short out and cause a fire. That was other than it was hard to strategically get everything kind of shut down and transferred over, where I had to turn the batteries, I guess, off to take out half of them, put in half of the new ones or a third of the new ones, and then strategically and just kind of get everything situated, getting all the settings right for the new batteries. Every time I put in a new section of batteries, I had to re-update some of the settings just to make sure that it understood that there was more batteries in there now than before. And what? It's over here in the window.
Okay.
Had no issues really to speak of 4 batteries. So those will be in probably another week. They shipped today out of Arizona, and they'll be in. And these will be just 4 more of what we have now for extra capacity, which kind of started the discussion with planning for the future. We can get by with all the batteries we put in, and everything will be in good shape. So I think Nikki's going to check our wall. It's having trouble today, but otherwise, I mean, the future planning we had talked about. Do we put in more garden beds? Do we put in more greenhouses? When was the right time to do that? Because we have a lot of stuff here. We have a lot of garden space now after 7 years of working on it. But initially year 1, and now we're up to a dozen. We had 6 the first year.
Yeah, and we're way over a dozen.
We're over a dozen. But we didn't do that in one shot. I mean,
no. I guess the big thing is, what we've been talking about lately is it seems like we see an awful lot of new homesteaders, especially one garden bed, and they don't think about what their needs are going forward, or they start with a very small battery bank. They don't think about the fact that it's not going to work forever.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. But they buy their meat chickens every year. So is that self-sustainable? No, not really. They haven't really planned for the future. So people were discussing the fact that
we had, over the weekend, I think it was, and I think the outcome of the conversation was, if you think you need something in the near future, it's time to go get it today.
Yeah.
Because with the shortages, and we had a good laugh this morning. Nikki read an article, the top 50 50 things that are having shortages right now, and it was some of it we had never even heard of. And I know we've talked about it a lot of electronics and lumber and metals and different things, but it was interesting to see all of the 50 things that were on the shortages, and a lot of them factored into diesel goes up. It definitely affects everything. Times a day, checking water every day. So Nikki, the Wi-Fi outside, we have a little spot, a secret spot on one of our trees that you can kind of put the little Wi-Fi puck out there, which does a pretty good job. It usually tricks the system with a better connection. We'll see if it works or not. Yeah, it looks better. Well, I think I'm out of stuff to talk about.
We didn't really start yet. I missed what you were saying. So I guess kind of the big things are when you're planning your homestead, you've got to kind of look at the big picture and start planning further out. Like I was saying with the chicken people, if your goal is to do meat chickens every year, you probably are not going to necessarily want leghorns, which are super power layers, but they're not meat chickens. That's not to say that you couldn't have some leghorns to do that kind of thing, but probably a dual purpose or something like a red ranger or something like that would be worth raising. Like right now, there's a lady that I know locally that has had goats for a while, and she did boar goats, and I can't think of the other meat type goat. Anyway, she's decided she wants to do milk goats. So she is basically dumping her entire herd right now and trying to find milk goats and basically starting over. So part of that was, she said, well, I always thought I wanted to do milk, but I bought what I could find in the beginning. So it wasn't like she's redesigning her barn because she's not really set up for a milk parlor at this point. Just kind of the long term, you kind of got to plan for your future. We all kind of start off with this is where we are today, right? So, like Kanan said, I started off with half dozen garden beds, but the garden spot we cleared was, 60 by 100, I think. So it was always a long term plan that there was going to be more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I still am not all the way there. I'm just not. And we've always played the rule of thumb that when I buy lumber for the one bed that I need this year, I buy lumber for a couple other beds and just get them built and get ahead of the curve a little bit. Because, sometimes like this spring, when you get to that certain point and now you're behind, you just kind of got to go with what you got. I was going to add a few more beds this year, but I couldn't because now I'm behind. If I'd have had them sitting there, I could have just gotten the soil and the compost and what I needed and started. So, and it's the same thing with batteries. So we have it where it works right now, but Kanan's talking about getting a lift for the garage. As we've mentioned in some of these other ones, we have a friend of mine coming to help out on the farm starting this fall. So we have to be thinking about the long-term power needs for not only us, but she's going to be living in a camper. We've got to make sure that we can help out with her power. She's, we're going to put in kind of a battery system for her and some solar panels. But we could get a snowy year. God, I hope so. And we might need to help her out on her power end. So it makes more sense to increase what we've got and to kind of go forth with that.
Well, and part of it also was the reason to get them was the supplier we bought them through. It took us a month because we were able to jump in a order they had already placed. We just took some of that allocation. We took 12 batteries out. I put them in. We got them Thursday. I had them in Friday. Is that right?
Yeah.
I put them in Friday most of the day. Saturday, after everything was done, I sent them an email. Of course, they were closed. So Monday, they called back or sent me an email back saying, "Great, that's awesome. You got everything installed. We do have additional batteries if you're interested." And so we had talked about it. Um, and really, I had been pondering if we should go bigger to give us more overnight opportunity for different things. And it took me about 24 hours to decide that yes, that was a good idea. And so I just told Nikki that I was thinking about buying more batteries. Here was my logic to it. And she was like, yeah, that makes sense, especially with another person coming in that we may need more power with and other pieces. Um, it made sense because they had them today. They could get them shipped out. So they shipped them today. I bought them Monday night. I think right.
He basically came over and just told me, "Hey, I'm gonna spend another $1,800," and I just went, "Okay."
I know, but it'll pay forward. It gives us more capacity when we need it, and when we don't, it just means we don't tax the batteries as much, trying to pull so much power out.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just kind of, you know, it's a good investment long term. Yes, at some point we'll have to replace inverters and all the other nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
But if the batteries will go 12 or 13 years, it'll be worth it.
Yeah, it'll be worth it. And right now, I think when I talked about the video in the last half of our failed battery video that I just put out over the weekend, one of the things I talked about was the cost of them. And now that I've bought a fourth set or a fourth string for it, we are probably priced in about the same amount as I would have been if I would have replaced the flooded lead acid with a completely new set of flooded lead acid batteries, and still would only got about 6 or 7 years versus the hopefully 12 to something of this new set by just changing over just to better technology. So it's, even if it costs the same to get double the life out of them with less hassle, it's, to me, it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, and planning for the future is all kinds of stuff. So we mentioned on this, I think on last week's live stream, or maybe the week before, the kind of screw up at our local coastal where they wrote me a rain check for fencing from 2 months ago.
Right.
That we went in and got. And y'all, I gotta tell you, we have fencing rolls everywhere right now. We must have a dozen rolls of fence sitting all over the place. Because we know that we need to put the fencing in. So we've bought it all because look, the prices are going up. We've got it on sale. We got it on good deals. So we picked up all this fencing. Of course, right now we can't get any of the posts that we need to put the fencing in. We have all the metal posts in place. We don't have the wood posts
for corners and strength
gates
and structure
and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, no wood posts anywhere. So we're waiting for those to come back in. But we took the time to draw out on paper and figure out, based on property lines and measurements, how much fencing we were going to need. And we bought it up. I mean, the one thing we haven't bought yet is our barbed wire. But we have enough field fence and goat fence to do the entire perimeter, do all of our cross pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, part of the whole vision, I guess, is kind of the big thing. I think too many people just kind of hold on to where, oh, well, we need to get to this point. Like I'm going to start with 2 dozen a buck rabbits. I see this a lot. So they buy like 4 cages, and then pretty soon they're trying to keep replacement stock and they don't have cages, and they didn't really plan on it. So now you've got hutches all over the place, and pretty soon it starts to look like chaos. So you kind of got to look at what the big picture of everything is. And even if you can't do all of it today, at least making a plan for the future so you got a better idea.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest setbacks, or one of the biggest things that hold people back is the financial piece of it. To say, I'm going to buy 8 cages now because I'm eventually going to need them versus the 4 I definitely need today. people may not be able to do that. I mean, I guess we always look for deals. When we looked at fencing, we've had fencing around here for a couple of years. Every time in the spring when they would go on sale, we would typically go in and buy a couple more rolls because we knew eventually we would need it, and because we're so dry, it really won't rust. We don't have to worry about equipment or fencing necessarily rusting too much around here.
No, so, that requires moisture.
I know, but we've also incrementally bought things ahead of time because we knew what the long-term vision looked like, and that was with fencing. And when it was on sale, we'd go buy another roll, or we'd buy a couple rolls, or we'd buy some fence posts. And I'm sure everyone that has visited here has probably come in and looked around and like, wow, you guys just have stuff everywhere. Because it, like you said, it does kind of look like chaos. We have 10 rolls of fence laying out there next to one of the pastures.
Yeah.
And we have panels other places. We have, just different things. Eventually it will all be put up and cleaned up, and, somebody would come back 5 years later and be like, wow, you guys used all this stuff.
God, I hope so.
Well, but lumber was the same way. For a certain point, we had stacks and stacks of lumber because we built an extra storage building.
Yeah.
We're always building garden beds. We're always building something. We're always adding to.
And in fairness, my dad owns a construction company that is getting ready to retire. They're getting ready to close down. So they have a lot of stuff in the yard.
Yeah.
So we get all the stuff from the yard.
Yeah, and we do. And so we've got piles of things around that we will eventually use up. But it's stuff that's not going to go bad, essentially. It's, we're not a few miles off the coast where you constantly have salt spray or
right.
moisture off the ocean that comes in.
Well, and another thing when it comes to planning for the future, so how many people last year grew gardens and thought, oh, when the tomatoes are ready, I'll make and can salsa. And there wasn't a canning jar or a canning lid to be found.
Yeah.
In miles and miles of pretty much anywhere.
Well, and I think the last year taught us that. That's part of the reason I went ahead and bought batteries, because when I talked to the salesman, he said, yes, today we have extra in stock that we could get them turned around in 24 to 48 hours and headed your way. We have another shipment coming in another month. So again, if let's say I messed around and waited a week, they could have sold out immediately because they're the lowest price I could find on the internet.
Yeah.
So he just said, today I have them, tomorrow I could get a complete order in where they just completely get bought out and you have to wait another month. And in this case, again, it wouldn't bother us. With our current setup, we could easily go another month. No big deal.
Yeah.
We've already got that craziness figured out. And it would be fine. And that's why I told Nikki, it would be fine. If he told me, nope, we've already sold out of all of our stock, we've got another one coming in a couple months, it would be no problem. I would just put in the order and say, we'll just wait for it because we don't need it to survive. It's just an addition. But, why wait when you don't have to? But again, like canning jars, canning lids, things that we know we need in 3 or 4 months when we're starting to can meat or vegetables.
Things that he's always accused me of hoarding.
Yeah, now she doesn't look like a hoarder.
I never looked like a hoarder.
Yeah, exactly. I think people thought we were hoarders sometimes because I think
just because I keep about 8 bottles of dish soap does not make me a hoarder.
I think there's a fine line between homesteading and prepping and hoarding. Everybody thinks you're crazy, and this is not directed at you, us.
Anita says our stuff all over the place. That's not mess. That's a prepper's dream.
It probably is, but I'm gonna say, everybody thinks a homesteader or a prepper, wherever you blur the line between that, is crazy until something happens, and then they're a genius. Tell me I'm wrong with that.
Well, I never think anybody's crazy. Unless they're like wearing a bathrobe on the side of the street or something, then that's kind of...
No, but go back to the show that was on what Discovery. It was the prepper show where they showed all the
Oh,
families.
Doomsday
Preppers, right?
Yeah.
In the beginning, you had families that really kind of had their stuff together. They were pretty good, but you had some that were pretty extreme out there on what they thought was going to happen. Now,
by season 2, they had really started looking for the extremists.
They were looking to make a mockery of everything. By season 2 and the later on, those people really kind of looked wackadoo. I mean, some of them were really pretty far out there on their beliefs. But I'll tell you what, if their scenario actually happened, people would look back and ask for their help because these geniuses were way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
So that's why I say homesteading and crazy is a fine line to walk.
Well, and it's not just the whole prepping and planning for the future isn't just a one-time deal either. Like, we had a whole building for turkeys and a building for my waterfowl, and I've got a building for my chickens. Well, we got rid of the ducks, so the waterfowl are down to geese.
Yep.
And so I'm rearranging how we're going to do that, and I was going to add a couple more turkey pins in it. But y'all, I got to tell you, turkeys aren't selling at all this year. They just aren't. So I'm going to be cutting my turkeys back. And chickens aren't doing so great, so we're cutting the chickens back. So now I've got these great big buildings, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do with them? So I'm adding some extra quail pin into one of them. And just going to build the rest of them out with some generic pins that I can use for whatever. Because who knows what the future is going to bring.
Well, but I think there's definitely an advantage when you look at the big picture to make everything flexible.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
don't get too typecast into anything.
Right, because when we built our barns, we built them, traditionally, so it's not anything crazy, but all the stall doors are big enough that we could change from goats, or we could, change out goats. Let's say if something happened or we didn't want the same amount of goats, could you put a horse in there?
That'd be tight.
It'd be tight.
So all of our stalls are 10 by 10, and I actually built them with the idea that at some point I was going to bring donkeys back in, because I had donkeys in Mississippi and loved them. At this point, the hay prices are so crazy, I'm not bringing anything in that can't eat sagebrush. And that's where we've adapted to, right? What I have, she's going to do sheep.
Yeah.
But we're going to build it in such a way that, yes, it will work for her sheep, but when her sheep are gone, because realistically, she won't be here forever, I hope. I love her to death, but, I mean, I guess if it all works out, I don't care, but the long-term vision is her to be here for a couple of years, learn stuff, and go on about her business. So I need that extra building to have maximum flexibility. It needs to do other things than just house sheep.
Right.
And she's going to put some hanging rabbit cages in there, and it'll have hay storage. But the long-term vision is I've got to look at that building and say, okay, well, I don't want to get too typey into sheep. I don't necessarily want to get overly typed into goats.
Right.
So what else can I do with the building?
Well, eventually this property, the goal with this property has always been to convert it to good pasture. The goats do a fantastic job of eating everything that's out there. So they'll eat grass, they'll eat weeds. They love to destroy the sagebrush, which we have a massive amount of. But long term, the goal was to use the goats to eat all the sagebrush off, eventually destroy it, get it all the roots out. They expose the grass, they expose the weeds, and then they will auto fertilize it. Now, I think last week I mentioned that I got our cone spreader back functional, and so we didn't get to it this week. I was hoping we would. The goal with it though is to put it on the tractor, go get a load of compost in it, and then Nikki can drive the field, basically spraying compost.
Little dry. I wanted to do it earlier in the spring. It's a little dry now, but yeah. It'll just sit. It'll wait until it gets wet this fall and start doing its thing. But
yeah, but the goal is that we always wanted to convert this 20 acres at least that the house is on, get rid of all the sagebrush for the allergens and everything else it brings with it. Let the goats eat all of it off. Now, we figured it'd probably be a good 10-year process, and it's probably going to be a little longer than that just because of the fencing. But
yeah, because sagebrush. So I learned this early on. Sagebrush is one of these creatures, if you will, that when you too many people go through and they plow it all off. Like even my dad did that here years and years ago. Plowed it all off. Well, it comes back because the roots are still in it. But when you attack sagebrush, like rip it out of the ground, as it's being ripped out, it actually releases. It's kind of like a toxin, and it keeps anything else from growing on it for a couple of years. And we found this out the hard way when we put in my garden. We kept planting stuff in the ground and it wouldn't grow. It just died. And that's so we went to raised beds and they worked. Well, now things grow in the garden. It's been, 6, 7 years.
right,
So ideally, ripping it out doesn't work. If you let the goats kill the bush, then what happens is you get no soil erosion because the roots are still holding the soil in.
mm-hmm.
You haven't denuded the rest of the ground, so the grass and the weeds and whatever is still there. But as those roots break down, they actually rot in the ground and make water channels deeper into the ground. So it makes more sense to leave the sagebrush and kill them in a more natural way. And of course, we don't do chemicals or anything because that's just not a good idea. But
right.
Yeah, it's a long process. Now the goats are 100% committed to their jobs.
They love it. We've been letting them out most nights, and it's kind of relaxing. I've put up shorts of just kind of them eating out there. It's pretty quiet. You hear the babies run around screaming a little bit and yelling for mom, but there's a good 15, 20 of them between all the babies and the moms. When you walk out to the fence, they come running because they're so excited. You just open the fence and just let them kind of graze around that 2 or 3 acres, and they eat in a circle. So they make a big circle. You give them about 2 or 3 passes, and you start shooing them in, and they've kind of got that rhythm now that they don't care that you're out there. Nikki and I took some chairs out the other night and just literally just sat out there in the field watching the goats eat and just hanging out. But
they love it.
When they understand, they've gotten to that rhythm now that when you start yelling or I basically clap to kind of get their attention and say, all right, time to go in, and Liza and the LGD that's out there, Skatey, with them, they will start to kind of shuffle them and push them to go back in. Skatey usually leads, Liza usually pushes from the back, and they take all the goats in.
Goats are kind of a funny thing. You don't really herd goats as much as you lead them, so they follow their dog, and the herding dog picks up the rest of them, which I know I talked to Anita about this back when I went to California State Convention about the whole it's hard to find a collie with any actual herding instinct. And is she great? No, she is not great, but she is making some huge progress.
Speaking of who?
Her biggest issue at this point is she still runs through the goats. She gets a little too excited, and then she ends up in the middle of them, and it's like, you can't herd from the center, kid. You can't herd from the center. But she's working on it.
She's working on it. She gets better all the time.
And that's kind of, that's another one of my long-term goals is, we've always kind of wanted... I've always wanted a stock dog, but I can't stand border collies or heelers. So we're trying to put the instinct, if you will, back into the collie, and she's doing really well with it. But so many of them have had it bred out, so it's kind of tough. But yeah, and it's also, when you talk planning for the future, like we've talked before, homesteading is all about getting ready for the next season. So we're starting to make our plan on how we're going to do firewood this year, especially in an extremely hot, dry year.
Yeah.
It's probably going to wait until October, which I hate to wait that long, but it's really not safe to be out doing a whole heck of a lot in the woods right now. Trying to make my list of things I'm going to can this year, trying to get stuff in the garden that will be ready to can. That's always kind of a fun thing.
Yeah.
But we're also starting to figure out how many rabbits do I want to overwinter this year, knowing that the market is kind of slumping. And we don't just plan for us for meat, we plan to have meat for the dogs too. So I've kind of got to figure that out of if they're getting one chicken or two rabbits a week, how much do I need? Because we have 7 dogs, and the two smallest ones are 60 pounds and 7. But everybody else around here, well, I guess Skady runs about
Gauge
50
about
pounds.
50-ish, yeah.
But everybody else is well over 100. So we have to figure that out. We do eggs and stuff throughout the rest of the year, but I have to figure out my meat needs for the dogs for the whole year, and you have to figure out how much dog food you need. And that's another thing. I see a lot of people, like there was a lady that had asked me how we store our feed. She's somewhere up to like 60 chickens. I guess she's running an egg business that works in some places. She's going to the store to buy feed every 3 days. Which I thought, I don't know how many bags you're buying, but every 3 days, that seems like an awful lot. So I was explaining how we store feed, and yeah, like she was a little worried because one time last year she couldn't even get feed.
Yep.
You know, during all the crazy and shipping delays and everything. So that's another thing you got a long term plan.
Yeah, I mean we always had in all the buildings just one can of food, and then 2 years ago maybe we added in a second feed can in every building. So, Nikki mentioned we had 3 buildings for our birds. There are two metal feed cans in there because there's always something trying to dig in there and eat, and they will go through plastic. Each rabbit house or each rabbit building has 2 cans, 2 metal cans. The tent that she has for some of the grow outs, 2 metal cans. You look at the barns for the dog food; they have 2 metal cans. I mean, we've got a lot of metal cans around here to keep everything in, but we keep sweet feed. You keep a smaller one, kind of a mini can. I guess it's only about what 30.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a smaller can.
Yeah, it's a smaller can, but that's got rabbit feed in for the grow outs out in the barn with the goats.
There's a can for mineral. There's
Yeah.
a can to try and sell, which is kind of interesting because our local Home Depot doesn't sell them anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that they'll be worth more than the like $25 that I spent on them. But they're great. I grew up with chickens, and my mom always had this tendency to keep chicken feed in plastic trash cans, and it never failed that something chewed in and ate everything. So metal for me, as long as they're out at direct sunlight, they don't sweat and mold the feed or anything like that. So.
Yeah. But it was incremental. Again, it was incremental based on the need, and it's flexible.
But we built it, so
yes.
all the bird buildings were actually built in such a way that I can accommodate up to 4 feed cans. That's an awful lot of feeding, especially with cutting birds down right now. You have to be worried about feed getting too old and losing nutritional value. But we're still, I still made spots for all of that, and we put other stuff in, like shavings and whatever else. But we've got room for expansion, and we did that on purpose because you can't. Adding that space back in later is really difficult.
Yeah.
If you don't plan for it on the front end.
It is. It's much easier to go bigger than needed in the beginning.
Yeah.
Than come back in later on and try to add to. And I say that just thinking of these batteries. With adding the 4th string in, I thought I was going to have to expand. Gosh.
You all right?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, but I've now need to expand the battery box, and it wasn't designed in a way that is going to be easy to modify to get them to fit. I'll make it work because I've already got in my head what I need to do, but it's going to take some time, and I don't have to rush it this time. Before, I was a little worried because it was already 90 something degrees, and we couldn't go without power for long. 5 to 10 minutes was fine, but you've got an incubator that's still trying to go. You've got fans for animals. We had a lot of things going on, and being down for 10 minutes was fine. Nothing would be affected. But being down for an hour or 2 hours or 4 hours
It's a big deal.
was a big deal when it's 90 degrees outside, and animal welfare is part of having power.
Yeah. So, I guess in talking about planning for the future, what are we planning for here? Basically, not only will she be working with me this next year, we're going to do a 4-day on, 4-day off thing. So I will have an apprentice with me all next year to be working on projects and teaching stuff. And luckily, she has some good fundamental knowledge of stuff. She's, from a horse background. She's done 4-H. Obviously, she's done rabbits. The rabbit program is continuing to be scaled back. Honestly, I'm looking at my darling little redhead Triantas and thinking about half of them are going. I hate to do it. I've put a lot of time and energy into them, but quite frankly, at this falling off on them, they take forever to get big enough to eat. So we're cutting them back. We're cutting chickens back. We're cutting some more turkeys back. The only thing that is not getting cut back around here are goats.
Yeah.
The goats are part of our land management program here, so the goats get to stay. So we will probably once again still winter about, if you will. Obviously, Canaan is expanding our batteries. We hope to be doing a whole bunch of canning this year. I am going to be reorganizing my pantry again, probably to make some room for the friend that will be coming. She's got a pretty good store of stuff, and I've got to have somewhere to put it because there's not going to be enough room in her trailer. So we'll also be, hopefully this fall, we'll be talking about that, about setting up a trailer and trying to get her ready for the winter, which will be kind of an interesting project. Luckily, my parents have done the winter thing but believe me when I say the map, if you will, of what is going to be going on here. Here we can get a better jump, if you will, on our regenerative program on the 40 next door. And because we totally missed the boat on it this year. We totally missed the boat.
Yeah.
You got the stream, it's everything. We just lost the board. So, but anyway, streamline the farm and to do a whole lot more interesting stuff this next year. And this year, I think, is going to be all about survival at this point because we keep fire danger is ratcheting up, heat's ratcheting up, and that's all I've got.
Yeah, that's it. Streamlining and getting ready to hit it hard next year. I mean, it's only halfway through this year, but by Halloween we could see snow, and it could be deep snow. It's hard to say. Typically when it's super hot in the summer, it's extremely cold and wet in the winter. That's where it was last time when we really saw something like this, like 5 years ago or so. Yeah,
and we're still working on a lot of projects here. Don't get me wrong. When I start talking about next year, like I said, we long-term plan around here all the time, but projects are slow and it's just taking a while to get everything done. I'm getting up at like 5:30 in the morning and getting outside by 6:30 right now, and I'm wiped by noon. It's just so freaking hot that you just can't get anything done. So unfortunately, my to-do list is kind of just sitting there stalled out waiting on me to get enough good weather to do anything. And whether or not we get any good weather this year is really hard to say at this point. I don't know that it's going to get any better. I think we're pretty much, I think July and August are going to be way worse. If this is what June looks like, I'm scared of July and August.
Well, and I talked to somebody earlier on a work call that was outside of Sacramento, and they're only 5 hours south of us, and they were hitting 112 to 114 this week.
Yeah.
Where we were 99. We hadn't even hit 100 yet, but it's not going to be long before we're hitting 100 pretty easy.
Well, yeah, Portland, Oregon. The latest forecast I saw for Monday or Tuesday is 115. So it's tough. It's tough everywhere right now. We're doing everything we can to keep what limited garden I have planted alive and going.
Yeah.
And we've got fire bans turned on for the campsites, so no fires because it's just not safe.
Yeah.
Which makes it more exciting because we're having some friends down this weekend, so we are gonna have to be very careful with a lot of our outside stuff, and it's gonna be around 100 degrees, so I have to be concerned about my guests getting too hot, and dogs and goats and all the rest of it. So it's gonna be an interesting time. And I keep seeing that we've got comments pop up, and honestly, guys, I can't get to them. Unfortunately, everything's crashed out, and I can't get in to see what everybody's commenting. So, I'll probably have to go back in and watch and see what we've got later.
Yep.
But yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to, and I'm a compulsive weather watcher to begin with. Cannon can tell you that. So I'm planning a week out, 2 weeks out, based on what my forecast is all the time. Like when I can actually leave the farm to go to town, when I can't, when fans have to be turned on, all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely an ongoing process. I think it was Michael that said early on in the discussion, it's been really hot, and he's been doing 2-liter frozen bottles for rabbits. And I foresee a lot of that this summer.
Yep.
A lot of that.
Yep.
We don't use them because we've got a slightly different setup. But yeah, I gotta imagine it's going to be a full-on fight to keep everybody going. I had a gal who bought some Americans from me last year.
Yeah.
Messaged me really upset yesterday that she thought she needed to get rid of the rabbits, that she couldn't keep them comfortable. And I finally just said, you're not going to keep them comfortable. Keep them alive at this point.
Yeah.
Because she's doing water bottles and wet towels and fans and all this kind of stuff. And she's like, they just look uncomfortable and unhappy. And they are. I mean, I raised rabbits in Mississippi. Trust me, in this kind of heat, they're unhappy. The goal is to keep them alive. And
get them through it.
Yeah, get them through it the best you can. They get a little bit of a respite overnight when it cools off, but yeah, it's just kind of what we're all dealing with, and that goes for people and chickens. I don't know why people tend to not plan to keep their chickens cool. It's almost like they don't think about the fact that poultry overheat too. And I can say this with supreme confidence because I lost 2 quail this last week to heat. We got really warm in the one building, and 2 baby geese. So I lost some birds overnight, and you lost a chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been really, really hot. So, you got to keep everybody cool in this kind of stuff. And I've got a bunch of goats in milk right now, which always makes it a little tough. They're more prone to heat type issues in the when they're milking, because the milking takes such a huge body requirement. But okay, well, I think we're just gonna go ahead and end it there, unless you've got anything else.
I don't.
I know we've got some stuff to get out and do, and the sky is turning purple to the west, so all the problems that we've had so far are gonna get worse. Because that's the joy of off-grid living right there.
Yep.
So, I do want to hear what everybody thinks. I've thought about trying to do these because we kind of do them, and they end up more podcasty than anything. I've thought about doing these like early in the morning and then just leaving them out there for everybody to watch later on. I don't know what everybody else thinks of that, but I guess kick me your opinions, make comments, whatever you want to do. But that might be easier because we have great internet in the morning. Absolutely great internet. But by the time we get this late in the day, everybody's home from work, from school.
Yep.
Especially in the summer, we get a lot of thunderstorms, high winds, that kind of stuff. So I've been thinking it might be easier to do them in the morning and post them. And I'm also looking at possibly doing them on a podcast, like a true podcast app. I have a podcast account with Castbox that I was thinking about doing, but so many projects, so little time.
I know it.
All right, guys. Well, that is it from Sprayer Homestead. Everybody, stay cool out there, and stay flexible, stay planning for the future, because I think we're in for a bumpy ride still to come.
Yep, I think in the next 2 years it's going to be interesting, I guess you would call it. There's going to be a lot of things that just aren't going to work out, and you've got to be flexible for that.
Well, like today, the article I was reading to him about the 50 things that are already in shortages. Most of those things are saying that they don't expect any recovery till 2022 and even into 2023. So just know that shortages are going to keep happening. Toilet paper for one, ketchup for another.
Yeah.
Bleach is another thing. So plan your homestead for the long term, and make those cuts like we talked about last week. Make those cuts where they need to be. Maybe start cutting back to your most productive animals, and hopefully everybody weathers the storm.
Yep.
So, all right, guys, happy homesteading. Have a good evening.